Hi, I'm Sophie Patz.
And I'm Sophia Blue.
Thanks for joining us on WGSCM. We are from the Girl Scout Troop 2483, and we have been learning about oysters.
Come join us while we visit different museums and other maritime sites while we explore why oysters are so important to the Chesapeake Bay. Back to you, Sienna.
Hi, this is Sienna Tasuka and today we are at the Annapolis Maritime Museum.
The Annapolis Maritime Museum is located in Eastport overlooking the beautiful Chesapeake Bay. Its mission is to educate people about the Annapolis area's maritime history and preservation of the Chesapeake Bay. Our Girl Scout troop participated in a very hands-on program to understand more about oysters. We also took some time to learn about the parts of an oyster, and we created our own oyster craft. It was really interesting to watch the docents dissect a real oyster. We examined the oyster to find the heart, gills, and the rest of the insides. Even though it looked gross and slimy, it was really cool. We did it all for research, and we learned a lot. There's a lot of cool stuff to see and do at the museum. They have an aquarium with lots of oysters, fish, and even an eel. There's a huge oyster model and an exhibit showing where they used to shuck oysters when it was the McNasby Oyster Company. The real work began when our Girl Scout troop went outside to help clean the oyster cages at the museum's dock. The museum participates in oyster gardening, which is growing oysters in cages to help replenish them in the Chesapeake Bay. It's important to make sure the cages are kept free of debris or mud that may clog the gills of the oysters, and also that small crabs didn't sneak inside and get caught within the walls of the cages. The cages were kind of slimy, and it was hard not to get dirty. This upkeep of oyster cages must be done about once a week to keep the oysters healthy. We worked hard, and it took a while to get them cleaned off with scrub brushes and hoses. Even so, nobody fell in the water, and we had a lot of fun with all of our friends while helping the Annapolis Maritime Museum.
Wow, that does look like fun and hard work.
Looks like our Girl Scout troop is learning a lot and helping out too. I wonder why oysters are so important.
Good question. Let's check out the next adventure and see what we can find out.
Hi there, my name is Kayla.
And I'm Sienna.
And we're here today at the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum
To learn more about oysters.
Let's go!
The Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum is right on the water in St. Michael's, Maryland. The bay is famous for its oysters, crabs, and other seafood. One translation of the word Chesapeake from the Algonquin language means Great Shellfish Bay.
Here is an oyster that we caught with these tongs. As you can see, it is real because it has both sides of the shell.
Oysters are filter feeders. Each oyster is like a small water treatment plant that filters all the water that passes through its gills as it feeds. In the 1600s, it took only 1 day to filter the same amount of water that it now takes 1 entire year to do because there are so many fewer oysters in the bay.
Hey Maddie, why don't you tell us a little about this lighthouse behind us?
Well, this lighthouse is the Hooper Strait Lighthouse, and it is one of 73 lighthouses on the Chesapeake Bay.
We camped overnight at this historic lighthouse and learned a lot at the museum's exhibits and about the decline of the oyster population. In the 1700s, hand tongs were used to harvest oysters. In the 1800s, a dredge device was able to scoop up oysters by the hundreds of millions.
After the oysters are shucked, they're put into these cans and sold to restaurants.
Once the canning process was fully developed, oysters could be preserved indefinitely and oyster harvesting increased. At its peak in the mid-1880s, over 20 million bushels of oysters were being taken from the bay each year. Literally, billions of oysters were harvested from the Chesapeake during a single century.
How much water can one oyster filter in 1 day? A single oyster can filter 50 to 60 gallons of water a day.
This has created huge environmental issues.
Fishermen would go on boats like these to harvest oysters.
A skipjack is a wooden sailing vessel that is between
25 and 50 feet long. It is the last commercial working boat under sail in the U.S. and became the Maryland State Boat in 1985. The name skipjack is taken from fish such as the skipjack herring, skipjack mackerel, and skipjack tuna. The skipjack fish leap in and out of the water and play on the water surface. The skipjack boats can resemble the fish as they dip through the bay. Very few skipjacks operate commercially today.
Wow, oysters filter the bay to make the water clear, and when their job is done, they are delicious.
So what can we do to help regrow the oyster population?
Glad you asked. Let's find out.
Our Girl Scout troop took on the task of oyster gardening with 3 oyster cages that we made ourselves. We bought the supplies through the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and they provided everything we needed, including the seed oysters. Throughout the school year, we went to the Whitehurst docks to clean and scrub the cages. While we were there, we got to see the spat on the oyster shells, showing that the seed oysters have been reproducing.
Here what you see is an oyster with baby spat growing on it. We hope to find a lot of oysters like these so that we can reproduce them.
You can go to the Chesapeake Bay Foundation to pick up your oysters and become an oyster gardener yourself.
In conclusion, oysters are an essential part of the bay and will keep the ecosystem healthy for years to come.
Here are some ways that you can help out by becoming an oyster gardener and learning more about the Chesapeake Bay.
This was Sophie Squared. See you at the bay!